are we going to have a recession? And I'll tell you, forecasting a recession is incredibly difficult. If any of us were any good at it, we would be able to take action to try to prevent the recession. And the fact is, recessions happen, that means we're allowed to be predicting recessions. The single best indicator we do have of recessions is this thing called the inverted yield curve. So what is the yield curve? When the government borrows money to fund itself, it borrows money from all of you and me. If you buy a treasury bond, you are making a loan to the US government. So if you buy a 1-year bond, you're making a 1-year loan to the government. If you buy a 30-year bond, you're tying up your money for 30 years and you're making a 30-year loan to the government. Typically, if you tie up your money for longer, you want a higher interest rate because they're borrowing your money for a long period of time than if you just tie it up for a year or two. So if you plot that, if you plot those interest rates, they form an upward sloping curve with short-term bonds having a low interest rate, longer-term bonds having a longer interest rate. Well, once in a while, something goofy happens and it flips. That short-term interest rates are higher than long-term interest rates. That's what's called the yield curve has inverted. And why does that happen? It happens because investors are worried about the future. They're worried about, is there a recession coming? They're worried, they say, I'd rather tie up my money for longer, even if I get a lower interest rate, because it's safer than if I put it in the stock market. So it's a sign of nervousness from investors. So every time that has happened in the past 40 or 50 years, a recession is followed in the next year or two. That has now happened. So that's a concerning sign. Now, every time it happens, there are some economists who go around and say, don't worry about it, this time is different. And then a year or two later, a recession happens, and they say, whoops, we were wrong, this time is not different. So right now, there are some economists going around saying, don't worry about it, this time is different. Unfortunately, I don't know if this time is different. I take the signal seriously. The good news is, the U.S. consumers are still doing well. By and large, most people have jobs. As I said, their wages are slowly climbing. So people have money to spend on their families, and they're spending it. But that's a little bit of a backward-looking indicator. A forward-looking indicator is that businesses are reducing their investments because businesses seem to be nervous about the future. So right now, the signals are mixed. And if we were to have a recession in the economy, in the U.S. economy, it would affect St. Cloud. It would affect central Minnesota. And you might see unemployment rates climb here as businesses are forced to cut back. And so unfortunately, when recessions happen, it's very hard to be immune from that. That's why we want to avoid them.